I have made a lot of mistakes in my 32 years on this earth, but the worst one, the one that haunts me still, is that I almost let her walk into that desert alone. My name is Thomas Brennan. People around Copper Ridge call me Tom the Silent. Not because I am shy, mind you, not because I lack opinions or convictions, but because after you bury your wife and your unborn child in the cold Montana ground, after you stand at that graveside and watch the preacher's lips move while hearing nothing but the wind, words just do not come easy anymore. Some men drown their grief in whiskey. Others lose themselves in work until their hands bleed and their backs break. I chose silence. For 3 years, I lived like a ghost in my own life. I worked my small ranch on the outskirts of Copper Ridge. I tended my cattle. I mended fences. I rode into town only when necessary, spoke only when spoken to, and left before anyone could ask me how I was doing. Because the truth was, I was not doing. I was merely existing. This is the story of how a woman I barely knew saved me from drowning in my own silence. This is the story of Caroline Reed, the school teacher from Boston who walked out of Copper Ridge alone on a late summer afternoon in 1883. And this is the story of how I finally learned to live again. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, at the moment when everything changed. It was a Thursday, I remember, because Thursdays were when I rode into town for supplies. The late August sun beat down on Copper Ridge like a hammer on an anvil. The air shimmered with heat. Dust devils danced in the streets. The mountains in the distance looked hazy and unreal, like something from a fever dream. I had just finished loading sacks of flour and grain into my wagon outside Henderson's general store when I heard them. 3 men standing on the wooden boardwalk, their voices carrying in that particular way men's voices carry when they think no one important is listening. I recognized them. Carl Henderson, the store owner's son, Miguel Santos, who worked at the livery stable, and Frank Dobbs, a ranch hand from the Garrison spread. They were laughing. Not the good-natured laughter of men sharing a joke. This was the cruel, satisfied laughter of men who had just watched someone else's downfall. Carl Henderson was speaking, his voice thick with mockery. Did you hear? That Eastern school teacher, Miss Caroline Reed, finally got what she deserved. Mayor's brother warned her, "You do not say no to a Garrison and walk away clean." The other 2 laughed. Miguel Santos shook his head. Shame, though. She was a good teacher. My sister's kids learned more in 6 months with her than they did in 2 years with old Miss Patterson. Frank Dobbs spat tobacco juice into the dust. Should have thought of that before she started throwing accusations around. Wade Garrison is a respected businessman. Who is going to believe some spinster from Boston over him? More laughter. I felt my jaw tighten. My hands gripped the edge of the wagon bed hard enough that my knuckles went white. The name Garrison made my blood run cold. Wade Garrison, the mayor's older brother. A man who wore expensive suits and called himself a land developer, but everyone knew what he really was. A bully, a predator. A man who took what he wanted and used his family's power to crush anyone who stood in his way. I knew this because 3 years ago, Wade Garrison had destroyed my life. My wife, Ruth, had worked as a maid at the Copper Ridge Hotel. She was beautiful, my Ruth. Hair the color of autumn leaves, eyes that sparkled when she laughed, a smile that could warm you from the inside out. We had been married for 2 years when it happened. She was 5 months pregnant with our first child. One evening in early winter, Ruth came home from work shaking. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled as she took off her coat. When I asked what was wrong, she told me. Wade Garrison had cornered her in one of the hotel's back hallways. He had put his hands on her. He had said things, terrible things, about what he wanted to do to her. When she pushed him away and slapped his face, when she threatened to tell his wife and the sheriff, he had smiled. He had smiled and said, "You will regret this, Ruth Brennan." 2 weeks later, our cabin burned to the ground. I had been out checking the fence line on the eastern pasture. It was a cold December afternoon. I saw the smoke rising from a distance, black and thick against the gray winter sky. By the time I rode back, flames were shooting through the roof. Neighbors had already formed a bucket line from the creek, but it was too late. The fire was too hot, too fast, too hungry. I tried to go in. 3 men had to hold me back as I screamed Ruth's name. I fought them like a wild animal. I broke free once and got as far as the porch before the heat drove me back. I could hear nothing but the roar of the flames and my own voice shouting her name again and again and again. They found her body the next morning in what had been our bedroom. The doctor said she had died from the smoke before the flames reached her. He said it like that was supposed to be a comfort. The sheriff ruled it an accident. A lantern knocked over. "These things happen in winter," he said, "when folks are trying to stay warm." Wade Garrison sent flowers to the funeral. He stood in the back of the church with his hat in his hands, looking solemn and respectful. I knew the truth. I knew it in my bones. But I had no proof, no witnesses, no evidence, just a certainty that lived in my chest like a stone. So I buried my wife and my unborn child. I rebuilt the cabin, and I stopped talking. Now, 3 years later, standing in the dusty street outside Henderson's General Store, I heard that Wade Garrison had struck again. Another woman, another victim, another life destroyed because she had dared to say no. I do not remember making the decision to follow her. I just remember climbing onto my horse and riding toward the edge of town. Something pulled me, some instinct I could not name. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was the ghost of Ruth whispering in my ear, maybe it was just the simple fact that I could not stand by and do nothing. Not again. I saw her as I crested the low hill on the eastern road out of Copper Ridge, a solitary figure walking away from town. She wore a dark blue dress and a plain bonnet. She carried a single carpet bag in her right hand. She was not looking back. Her shoulders were straight. Her pace was steady. But there was something about the way she moved, something in the set of her spine, that spoke of barely contained devastation. The eastern road led to Silver Falls, the nearest town of any size. It was 40 miles away through open country. The Shoshone still claimed this land, though treaties and soldiers had pushed them into smaller and smaller territories. The trail crossed 2 rivers and passed through a stretch of badlands where rattlesnakes basked on the rocks and mountain lions hunted at dusk. No one walked that road alone, especially not a woman, especially not unarmed. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western mountains. In a few hours, it would be dark. I dug my heels into my horse's flanks and rode down the hill toward her. She must have heard the hoofbeats because she stopped walking. She did not turn around immediately. She just stood there in the middle of the dusty road, waiting. When I came alongside her, when my horse's shadow fell across her path, she finally looked up. I had seen Caroline Reed before, of course. Copper Ridge was not a large town. You could not avoid seeing everyone eventually. But I had never really looked at her, not the way I looked at her now. She was younger than I had thought, maybe 26 or 27. Her hair, what I could see of it beneath her bonnet, was a light brown color with hints of gold where the sun caught it. She had high cheekbones and a determined chin that spoke of stubbornness. But it was her eyes that stopped me. They were blue-gray and guarded, the kind that had seen too much disappointment. They held a quiet devastation I recognized immediately because I had seen it in my own mirror for 3 years. "Miss Reed," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. I cleared my throat. "Miss Reed, you cannot walk to Silver Falls alone. It is 40 miles through Shoshone territory." She studied me for a long moment, her gray-blue gaze unwavering. When she spoke, her voice was cool and controlled, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "I will take my chances with the Shoshone over this town, Mr. Brennan." She knew my name. I was surprised by that. I suppose everyone knew everyone's name in Copper Ridge, even the silent ones, even the ghosts. She started walking again. I rode beside her slowly, my horse matching her pace. "Please," I said, "just let me ride with you, at least until you are clear of the dangerous country." She stopped again. This time when she looked at me, there was something sharp in her gaze, something evaluating. Why? Why would you care what happens to me? You have never spoken to me before. You have never even looked at me before. She was right, of course. I had no good answer. At least, no answer I could easily put into words. Because 3 years ago, I did not ride fast enough to save my wife when our cabin caught fire. The words came out before I could stop them. I stood there and I watched her burn. I will not watch another woman walk into danger while I do nothing. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. In reality, it was probably only a few seconds. Caroline Reed held my gaze. I saw surprise flicker across her face. And something else. Recognition, maybe. One wounded soul seeing another. "I heard about your wife," she said quietly. "I am sorry." I nodded. I did not trust myself to speak. She shifted the carpet bag from her right hand to her left. "Why do you think I am in danger, Mr. Brennan? I am simply leaving a town that has made it clear I am not welcome." "Because Wade Garrison does not let people just leave," I said. "Not when they have embarrassed him. Not when they have told the truth about him." Her face went very still. "How did you know it was the truth?" I met her eyes. "Because he did the same thing to my wife. She worked at the hotel. He cornered her. She fought him off and threatened to report him. 2 weeks later, our cabin burned down with her inside it. The sheriff called it an accident." Caroline Reed's hand went to her throat. "Oh God," she whispered. "There is no proof," I continued. "There never is with men like Wade Garrison. But I know, and I have to live with the fact that I could not protect her. I have to live with the fact that I let him win." I paused. I looked down the empty road stretching toward the horizon. "But I do not have to let him win again," I said. "Please, Miss Reed, let me ride with you, not because you need saving, but because I need to do one thing right." She studied me for another long moment. I could see her weighing her options, calculating risks, trying to decide if I was trustworthy or just another man with an agenda. Finally, she nodded once. "One condition," she said. "You do not try to convince me to come back to Copper Ridge. I am done with that town. I am done with Wade Garrison and his lies and everyone who believed him. I want to go to Silver Falls. I want to put as much distance between myself and this place as possible. I will not try to stop you," I promised. She nodded again. "Then I accept your escort, Mr. Brennan." I swung down from my horse. "Please call me Tom. And I think you should ride. It is a long way to walk, and we need to make good time before dark." "I am perfectly capable of walking," she said, but there was less ice in her voice now. "I know you are. But there is no sense in exhausting yourself before we even clear the first 10 miles. Please." She hesitated, then handed me her carpet bag. I secured it to the saddle, then offered her my hand. She placed her hand in mine. It was small and warm. I could feel calluses on her palm from holding chalk and lifting books. I helped her up onto the horse, making sure she was settled securely, then took the reins and began walking. "You are not riding?" she asked. "You are my guest," I said. "And the horse cannot carry both of us all day. We will trade off." We walked in silence for the first mile. The sun continued its slow descent. The shadows of the mountains grew longer. Behind us, Copper Ridge disappeared into the heat shimmer. Ahead, the road stretched empty and endless. I had not ridden out of Copper Ridge in 3 years, not since the funeral, not since I rebuilt the cabin. The familiar landscape looked strange to me now, as if I were seeing it for the first time. The rolling grasslands, the distant peaks, the vast blue dome of the sky. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Montana was always beautiful and always unforgiving. "Tell me what happened," I said after a while. "Not because I doubt you, but because I want to know the truth before we go any further." Caroline was quiet for so long I thought she might refuse. Then she began to speak. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. "I arrived in Copper Ridge in February," she said. "I came from Boston. My father was a professor there. He died last winter. My mother had passed years before. I had no siblings, no close family. Teaching was all I knew, and Boston was full of teachers. I saw an advertisement for a position out west. I thought it would be an adventure. I thought it would be a fresh start. She paused. I could hear the bitter irony in her silence. The first few months were good, she continued. The children were eager to learn. The parents seemed grateful. I rented a small room above the bakery. I attended church on Sundays. I kept to myself. I tried to be the model school teacher. What changed? I asked. Wade Garrison changed, she said simply. He started coming by the school. At first it seemed innocent. He would ask about his nephew's progress. He would bring donations of books. He was always polite, always respectful, but there was something in the way he looked at me, something that made my skin crawl. I nodded. I knew that look. I had seen Wade Garrison give it to Ruth. In July he started becoming bolder, Caroline continued. He would arrive just as I was closing up for the day. He would offer to walk me home. I always declined politely. Then one evening, about 3 weeks ago, he was waiting inside the schoolhouse when I finished preparing lessons for the next day. He had locked the door. Her voice faltered slightly. I stopped walking and looked up at her. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw tight. He told me he was tired of playing games, she said. He told me he had been patient. He said it was time I showed some gratitude for his generosity. When I told him to leave, he grabbed my wrist. He pulled me toward him. He tried to kiss me. What did you do? I asked quietly. I fought him, she said. There was steel in her voice now. I scratched his face. I kicked him. I got free and I unlocked the door and I ran. I went straight to the sheriff. I told him everything. I showed him the marks on my wrist where Wade had grabbed me. And what did the sheriff do? Nothing, she said bitterly. He told me I must have misunderstood Mr. Garrison's intentions. He said Wade Garrison was a respected businessman who would never behave in such a manner. He suggested that perhaps I had encouraged his attentions without realizing it. He actually said that. As if I do not know my own mind, as if I do not know the difference between courtesy and assault. I felt anger rising in my chest, the same impotent rage I had felt 3 years ago when the sheriff dismissed my suspicions about the fire, the same helpless fury at a system that protected powerful men and blamed their victims. What happened next? I asked. Wade Garrison spread lies, Carolyn said. Within days, rumors were everywhere. He told people I had propositioned him. He said I had behaved improperly with several married men in town. He claimed I was unfit to teach children. The school board called a meeting. They asked me to defend myself against accusations that were complete fabrications. When I tried to tell the truth, they looked at me like I was hysterical, like I was delusional. Her voice broke slightly. She cleared her throat and continued. Yesterday, they asked for my resignation. They said it would be better if I left quietly. They said if I made a fuss, if I tried to fight this, they would make sure no school in Montana Territory would ever hire me. So I resigned. And today I packed my bag and I left. I was silent for a long moment. What could I say? That I was sorry? Sorry seemed inadequate for what Wade Garrison had done to her. Sorry seemed like an insult. You did the right thing, I finally said, fighting back, not staying silent. My Ruth, she stayed silent at first. She was scared. She thought if she just avoided him, it would blow over. But men like Wade Garrison, they do not stop. They escalate. Is that why he killed her? Caroline asked softly. I believe so, I said, though I will never be able to prove it. We walked on. The sun touched the peaks of the western mountains. The sky began to shade from blue to gold to pink. We were perhaps 5 miles from Copper Ridge now, far enough that if I looked back, I would see only empty road and distant hills. Tom, Caroline said suddenly, may I ask you something? Of course. Why did you stay? After your wife died, after you knew Wade Garrison was responsible, why did you stay in Copper Ridge? The question hit me harder than I expected. I had asked myself the same thing 1,000 times over the past 3 years. The answer was complicated and simple at the same time. Because Ruth is buried there, I said, in the cemetery on the hill. I visit her grave every Sunday. I tell her about my week. I bring her wildflowers in the summer. I could not leave her. But you are leaving now, Caroline observed gently. I am not leaving, I said. I am escorting you to safety. Then I will go back. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think your wife would want you to live, Tom. Not just exist. Live. I did not answer. I could not. The lump in my throat was too large. We made camp that evening in a small grove of cottonwood trees near a creek. The water was cold and clear, running down from the mountain snowmelt. I unsaddled the horse and let him drink. Caroline gathered kindling while I got a fire started. We had salt pork and hardtack for my supplies. It was not much, but it was enough. As the fire crackled and darkness settled over the prairie, as the stars began to appear one by one in the vast bowl of the sky, Caroline and I sat on opposite sides of the flames. The silence between us was comfortable now. Not the heavy silence of grief, but the companionable silence of two people who understood each other without needing to fill every moment with words. Tom, Caroline said after a while, thank you for coming with me, for believing me. You are the first person in Copper Ridge who did. You are welcome, I said, though I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I had spoken up for you when the rumors started. I wish I had not been so caught up in my own grief that I missed what was happening. You could not have known, she said. But I should have paid attention, I replied. I let myself become blind to everything except my own pain. That was selfish. It was human, Caroline said gently. Grief is not selfish, Tom. Grief is survival. We fell silent again. I watched the flames dance. I thought about Ruth. I thought about the 3 years I had spent as a ghost. I thought about the fact that I was sitting here now, beside a woman I barely knew, feeling more alive than I had felt since the day my wife died. It was terrifying, and it was necessary. Caroline, I said suddenly, there is something you should know about where we are going. She looked at me across the fire, her face half lit by the flickering light. Silver Falls is not safe for you, I continued. It is only 40 miles from Copper Ridge. Wade Garrison has business interests there. He has friends. If he wants to find you, he will find you. Then where should I go? She asked quietly. I hesitated. What I was about to say was presumptuous. It was forward, but it was also the truth. My ranch, I said. It is small, just a few acres of good grazing land and a cabin. But it is mine, free and clear, no debts, no one to answer to. You could stay there, just until things settle down, just until you figure out your next move. Carolyn stared at me. I could not read her expression in the firelight. You barely know me, she said. That is true, I admitted, but I know Wade Garrison. I know what he is capable of, and I know I could not live with myself if I delivered you to Silver Falls only to have him follow you there. What would people say? Caroline asked. A single woman staying at your ranch, alone with you? Let them say what they want, I replied. I stopped caring about gossip 3 years ago. Besides, my mother lives in town. She can be your chaperone if propriety demands it, though knowing my mother, she will be more interested in making sure you eat properly and get enough rest. Caroline smiled slightly. It was the first time I had seen her smile. It transformed her face. Your mother sounds wonderful, she said. She is, I agreed. She is also stubborn and opinionated and will absolutely take your side in any disagreement. Fair warning, Caroline laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it felt like a victory. I will think about it, she said. Thank you for the offer. We settled into our bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. I lay on my back, looking up at the stars. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. I heard Caroline shift in her blankets. I heard the fire pop and crackle. I heard a coyote call in the distance, lonely and wild. Tom? Caroline's voice came soft through the darkness. Yes? Do you still talk to her? Your wife? Every day, I said. I tell her everything. About the ranch, about the weather, about the horses. I tell her I am sorry I could not save her. I tell her I miss her. Do you think she hears you? I do not know, I admitted. But I hope so. I hope wherever she is, she knows I have not forgotten her, that I will never forget her. I think she knows, Caroline said quietly, and I think she would be glad you came with me today. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the fire die down to embers, and I let myself believe that Caroline was right. I let myself believe that Ruth, wherever she was not angry that I had finally stepped out of my silent prison. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to keep living. Sleep came slowly. When it finally took me, I dreamed of Ruth. But for the first time in 3 years, it was not the nightmare of the burning cabin. It was a memory from before. Ruth and I standing on the hill overlooking the valley where we would build our life together, her hand in mine, her smile bright as the sun, her voice saying, "This is perfect, Tom. This is exactly where we are meant to be." I woke before dawn to find the fire cold and the sky just beginning to lighten in the east. Caroline was already awake, sitting on a rock near the creek, looking out at the landscape. I rolled up my bedroll and went to join her. "Could not sleep?" I asked. "Too much on my mind," she said. "I keep thinking about what happens next, where I go, what I do. I saved a little money from teaching, but not much. Certainly not enough to start over somewhere new." "Then stay," I said, "at my ranch. At least through the winter, you can teach. There are families scattered all over these hills, children who have no school because it is too far to ride to town every day. You could teach them. I could help you build a schoolroom in the barn." She turned to look at me. "Why are you doing this? Really?" I thought about my answer carefully. "Because Ruth used to say that the worst thing a good man can do is nothing," I said finally. "I have done nothing for 3 years. I have hidden. I have been silent. I have let grief turn me into a coward. But yesterday, when I heard those men laughing about what happened to you, when I saw you walking out of town alone, something in me woke up. I realized I could not keep living as a ghost. I had to choose. I had to do something." I paused. "You did not ask to be the catalyst for my redemption," I said. "That is not fair to you. But the truth is, helping you is helping me. Protecting you is me finally doing what I should have done 3 years ago. Maybe I cannot save Ruth, but I can stand with you." Caroline's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time," she whispered. We rode through the morning in companionable silence, trading off between walking and riding. The landscape changed as we moved east. The rolling grasslands gave way to rougher terrain. Rocky outcroppings thrust up from the earth like broken teeth. Juniper and sage dotted the hillsides. In the distance, I could see a line of darker green that marked Thunder Valley, where we would camp tonight. Around midday, I heard something that made me pull the horse to a stop. Hoofbeats, multiple riders. Coming from behind us, Caroline heard it too. Her hand gripped my shoulder. "Is it them?" "I do not know," I said, "but we need to move, now." I helped Caroline down from the horse quickly. "There," I said, pointing to an outcropping of rocks about 50 yards off the road. "Get behind those rocks. Stay low. Do not come out until I call for you." "What about you?" she asked. "I will deal with whoever is coming," I said. I pulled my rifle from the saddle scabbard and checked that it was loaded. "Tom, be careful," Caroline said. She looked frightened. "I will," I promised. "Now go." She ran toward the rocks. I watched until she disappeared behind them, then I turned to face the road. The hoofbeats were getting louder. I could see dust rising in the distance. 3 riders, maybe 4. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had not pointed a gun at another man in 3 years, but the muscle memory was still there. I positioned myself in the middle of the road and waited. The riders came into view. There were 4 of them. I recognized the lead rider immediately. Frank Dobbs, the same ranch hand I had overheard yesterday outside Henderson's store. The men with him were all from the Garrison spread, hard men with harder eyes. They pulled up about 20 feet away from me. Frank Dobbs took off his hat and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. He looked at me and the rifle in my hands and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Tom Brennan," he said. "Fancy meeting you out here. Where are you headed?" "Silver Falls," I said evenly. "Not that it is any of your business." Frank Dobbs nodded slowly. He looked around, taking in the empty road, the rocks, the horse standing behind me. "Funny thing," he said. "We are looking for someone, a young woman, a school teacher. You would not happen to have seen her, would you?" "No," I lied. "See? That is interesting," Frank said. "Because we tracked footprints and hoof prints leaving Copper Ridge yesterday evening. 2 sets, 1 horse. Looks like someone was walking alongside. Tracks lead right to this spot. So I will ask you again. Where is Miss Caroline Reed?" I raised the rifle slightly. Not enough to aim at him directly, but enough to make my intentions clear. "I do not know what you are talking about," I said. "And even if I did, I would not tell you. Now I suggest you turn around and head back to Copper Ridge before someone gets hurt." Frank Dobbs' smile vanished. "Mr. Garrison wants to talk to Miss Reed," he said coldly. "That is all. Just a conversation. No one needs to get hurt if she comes back peacefully." "No," I said flatly. "Tom," Frank said, his voice taking on a warning tone, "you do not want to make an enemy of Wade Garrison. You already lost 1 woman because of him. You really want to go through that again?" The rage that swept through me was so sudden and so complete that for a moment I could not see anything except red. My finger tightened on the trigger. Every cell in my body wanted to shoot Frank Dobbs off his horse, to make him pay for those words, to finally strike back at the man who had destroyed my life. But I did not, because Ruth's voice was in my head, clear as if she were standing beside me. "Violence only breeds more violence, Tom. Be better than them." I lowered the rifle slightly, though I kept it ready. "Get off my land," I said quietly. "This is not your land," Frank protested. "This is open territory." "Then it is not your land either," I said, "which means you have no right to stop me or anyone traveling with me, so I will say it one more time. Turn around, go back to Copper Ridge. Tell Wade Garrison that Caroline Reed is under my protection. If he wants to talk to her, he can go through me." Frank Dobbs stared at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing options, trying to decide if I was serious. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, Tom, we will go back. But you are making a big mistake. A mistake you will regret." "I have a lot of regrets," I said, "but standing up to bullies will not be one of them." The 4 riders turned their horses and rode back toward Copper Ridge. I stood in the middle of the road, watching them until they disappeared into the heat shimmer. Only then did I lower my rifle. Only then did I realize I was shaking. "Caroline," I called, "they are gone. You can come out." She emerged from behind the rocks. Her face was pale. She had heard everything. "You just made a powerful enemy," she said. "I already had one," I replied. "Now he just knows I am not afraid anymore." We reached Thunder Valley as the sun was beginning its descent toward evening. The valley was aptly named. In the summer, thunderstorms would roll through almost every afternoon, dark and violent and brief. Today the sky was clear, but I could see clouds building on the western horizon. We would have rain tonight. I found a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock. It was not much, but it would keep us dry. We set up camp quickly. Carolyn gathered wood while I tended to the horse. We worked in comfortable silence, each of us knowing what needed to be done. As we sat by the fire that evening, eating our meager dinner, Caroline spoke. "Tom, there is something I need to tell you, something I should have told you yesterday." I looked at her. In the firelight, her face looked young and vulnerable. "I am not running from just Copper Ridge," she said quietly. "I am running to someone." She reached into her carpetbag and pulled out a small leather portfolio. She opened it and removed a photograph. She handed it to me. The photograph showed Caroline standing next to a man in a formal suit. Between them, holding both their hands, was a little girl, maybe 5 years old. She had Caroline's eyes and smile. "This is Lucy," Caroline said softly. "My daughter." I stared at the photograph. I had not expected this. I had assumed Carolyn was unmarried, a spinster, as Frank Dobbs had called her, but here was proof of a family, a child. Her father? I asked carefully. Gone, Carolyn said flatly. He left when Lucy was 2 years old. We were never actually married. He promised we would be, but then I got pregnant and suddenly all his promises disappeared. He gave me some money and told me to handle it quietly. I refused. I kept Lucy. I raised her alone. She took a shaky breath. When I got the teaching position in Copper Ridge, I could not bring her with me, Caroline continued. It was too far, too dangerous, so I left her with my sister in Silver Falls. Ellen is a good woman, married, stable. She agreed to care for Lucy while I saved money to bring her to Copper Ridge for the school year. But now you cannot bring her back, I said. No, Caroline had said. Her voice broke. Now I do not even have a job. I have no way to support her. I have nothing. Tears were streaming down her face now. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back sobs. I set down the photograph gently. I moved around the fire and sat beside her. I did not touch her. I just sat there, close enough that she would know she was not alone. Caroline cried. She cried for her daughter. She cried for her lost job and her destroyed reputation. She cried for the injustice of it all. And I sat beside her in silence, because sometimes silence is the most respectful thing you can offer someone in pain. When she finally stopped crying, when she had wiped her eyes and taken several deep breaths, she looked at me. I am sorry, she said. I should not have broken down like that. Do not apologize for being human, I said gently. You have been through hell. You are entitled to cry. She nodded. She looked at the photograph still lying between us. I want you to know something, Tom, she said. When we get to Silver Falls, when I see Lucy again, I am going to tell her about you. I am going to tell her that when things were darkest, when I thought I was completely alone, a good man came riding out of nowhere and stood beside me. I am not a good man, I said quietly. A good man would have stopped Wade Garrison 3 years ago. A good man tries, Caroline said firmly. That is all any of us can do? Try. We sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. The wind moved through the valley. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Caroline, I said finally, about my offer. To stay at my ranch, the offer still stands. But I want you to know, it is not just for you now. It is for Lucy too. Both of you. For as long as you need. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them now, something that looked like hope. You would do that? For both of us? I would, I said. My ranch is small, but there is room. And a little girl should be with her mother. Why? Caroline asked. Why are you so kind to me? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. I thought about my answer. I thought about Ruth. I thought about the 3 years I had spent in silence. I thought about the choice I had made yesterday when I heard those men laughing. Because Ruth used to say that kindness is never wasted, I said. Because helping you gives my life meaning again. Because maybe, just maybe, this is why I survived when Ruth did not. So I could be here, now, when you needed someone. I paused. And because you deserve kindness, Caroline. You and Lucy both. You deserve a fresh start, a safe place, a chance to rebuild. Caroline reached out and took my hand. She squeezed it gently. Thank you, Tom, she whispered. Thank you for giving me hope when I thought I had none left. We sat there, hands clasped, watching the fire burn down to embers. The storm clouds were closer now. I could smell rain on the wind. We should get some sleep, I said. Tomorrow we reach Silver Falls. You will see your daughter again. Caroline smiled. For the first time since I had met her, it was a genuine smile, full and bright and real. Yes, she said. Tomorrow I see Lucy. Tomorrow everything starts to get better. I hoped she was right. But I also knew that Wade Garrison was not the kind of man who let things go. Frank Dobbs and his men had turned back today, but they would be back, with more men, with more threats. The storm was coming, not just the thunderstorm building on the horizon, but a reckoning that had been 3 years in the making. As I lay in my bedroll that night, listening to the first drops of rain begin to fall, I made a silent promise to Ruth. I promised her that this time I would not fail. This time I would protect the innocent. This time I would stand against Wade Garrison and whatever forces he brought against us. This time I would do it right. The rain came harder. Thunder rolled through the valley like the voice of God. Lightning lit up the sky in brilliant flashes. But beneath the overhang, Caroline and I stayed dry. And somehow, despite everything, despite the danger we were riding toward, I slept better that night than I had in 3 years, because I was not alone anymore, because I had a purpose, because Caroline Reed, the woman who had walked out of Copper Ridge with nothing but a carpetbag and her dignity, had given me back something I thought I had lost forever. She had given me a reason to live. The rain stopped before dawn. I woke to the sound of water dripping from the rock overhang and the soft calls of mourning doves in the distance. The air smelled clean, washed free of dust. Everything looked sharper, more vivid, as if the storm had scrubbed the world down to its essential colors. Caroline was already awake, sitting near the edge of our shelter, looking out at the valley. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She had taken off her bonnet during the night. In the early morning light, she looked younger than her 26 years. Vulnerable. But there was something in the set of her shoulders that spoke of determination. "Morning," I said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She turned and smiled. "Good morning, Tom. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in a long time," I admitted. "You?" "I dreamed about Lucy," she said softly. In my dream she was running toward me across a field of wildflowers. She was laughing. When I woke up I could still hear her laughter. "That is a good dream," I said. "It is," she agreed. "And today I get to see her for real. Today I get to hold my daughter again." The hope in her voice made my chest tight. I wanted so badly for that hope to be justified, for this story to have a happy ending. But I could not shake the feeling that we were riding into something dangerous, that the confrontation with Frank Dobbs yesterday had been only the beginning. "We should move soon," I said. "If we make good time, we can reach Silver Falls by late afternoon." Caroline nodded. She began rolling up her blanket. I went to check on the horse and gather our supplies. As I worked, I found myself thinking about what Caroline had told me last night. About Lucy. About being a mother raising a child alone. About the impossible choices she had faced. I thought about Ruth and the child we never got to meet. A son or daughter who would have been almost 3 years old now if that fire had not happened. I wondered what kind of father I would have been. Patient like my own father? Stern? Gentle? I would never know. But maybe, just maybe, I could be something to Lucy. Not a father, that was not my place, but a protector, a friend, someone who made sure she and her mother were safe. We broke camp quickly and efficiently. The morning was cool but promised heat later. We were moving through higher country now. The valley had given way to rolling hills covered with sage and juniper. The road was rougher here, rocky and uneven. I walked beside the horse while Caroline rode. We did not talk much. Both of us were lost in our own thoughts. Around mid-morning we stopped to rest and water the horse at a small creek. Caroline dismounted and stretched. I could see the weariness in her movements. 2 days of travel were taking their toll. "How much farther?" she asked. "Maybe 4 more hours," I said. "We are making good time, better than I expected." She nodded and knelt by the creek to splash water on her face. When she stood up, droplets clung to her eyelashes and cheeks. She looked at me with those storm cloud eyes. "Tom," she said, "what happens when we get to Silver Falls? I mean, after I see Lucy, what then?" I had been thinking about this question all morning. The truth was, I did not have a clear answer, only instincts and half-formed plans. "We get Lucy," I said. "We make sure she is safe and well. Then we decide together what comes next. If you want to stay in Silver Falls, I will help you find a place and work. If you want to come back to my ranch, the offer still stands." "And Wade Garrison?" Caroline asked quietly. "What about him?" I looked at her steadily. "Wade Garrison is my problem, not yours. I will deal with him." "He is my problem too," Caroline said firmly. "He destroyed my life just as much as he destroyed yours. I deserve to face him." She was right, of course. But the thought of Caroline anywhere near Wade Garrison made every protective instinct in my body scream in protest. "Let us focus on getting to Silver Falls first," I said. "Then we will figure out the rest." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But Tom, I want you to know something. I am not some fragile eastern flower who needs to be shielded from harsh realities. I have survived worse than Wade Garrison. I can handle whatever comes next." "I know you can," I said, "but that does not mean you have to handle it alone." We mounted up and continued east. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose. By noon, we were both sweating. The landscape had changed again. We were entering Badlands country now. Strange rock formations rose from the earth in twisted shapes. The ground was harder, more barren. Rattlesnakes sunned themselves on flat rocks. Vultures circled overhead in lazy spirals. This was dangerous country, not just because of the natural hazards, but because it was isolated, empty, the kind of place where bad things could happen and no one would know. I kept scanning the horizon, watching for riders, listening for hoofbeats, but we saw no one. The road stretched empty in both directions, just us and the horse and the vast indifferent sky. We stopped again in the early afternoon to rest in the shade of a rock overhang. Caroline was quiet. I could see tension in her face. The closer we got to Silver Falls, the more nervous she became. "What if she does not remember me?" Caroline said suddenly. "Lucy, what if she has forgotten her own mother?" "She will remember you," I said with certainty. "Children do not forget their mothers. My own mother used to say that the bond between a mother and child is written in the soul. No amount of time or distance can erase it." "Your mother sounds very wise," Caroline said. "She is," I agreed. "She is also going to have a lot of questions when I bring you and Lucy back to Copper Ridge. Fair warning, she will probably try to feed you until you cannot move and will absolutely give me a lecture about propriety and proper courtship procedures." Caroline laughed. The sound was like water over stones, clear and bright. "Courtship?" she said. "Is that what this is?" The question caught me off guard. I felt heat rise in my face that had nothing to do with the sun. "I did not mean it like that," I said quickly. "I just meant that my mother is very traditional about these things. She will insist on doing everything proper and correct." "And what about you?" Caroline asked. "Are you traditional about these things?" I met her eyes. The question felt important somehow, like my answer mattered more than just polite conversation. "I used to think I was," I said slowly. "I courted Ruth for 2 years before I proposed. I asked her father's permission. We had a proper church wedding. I did everything the way I was supposed to." I paused. "But then Ruth died," I continued. "And I realized that all those rules and traditions, they did not protect us. They did not make our time together any longer or more meaningful. What mattered was that we loved each other, that we chose each other every day." I looked at Caroline directly. "So, no," I said. "I am not traditional anymore. I think life is too short and too uncertain to worry about what other people think is proper. I think we should do what feels right and true and let the rest take care of itself." Caroline held my gaze. Something passed between us in that moment. An understanding, an acknowledgement of possibility. "I think I agree with you," she said softly. We sat in charged silence for a moment. Then Caroline stood and brushed dust from her skirt. "We should keep moving," she said. "I want to reach Silver Falls before dark." We rode through the hottest part of the afternoon. The sun beat down mercilessly. The air shimmered with heat. We were both exhausted, but neither of us suggested stopping. We were too close now, too near to our destination. As we crested a rise, I saw it, Silver Falls, in the distance. It was bigger than Copper Ridge, maybe twice the size. I could see the main street lined with buildings, church steeples rising above the rooftops, smoke from chimneys, signs of civilization. "There," I said, pointing. "Silver Falls." Caroline sat up straighter in the saddle. Her hand went to her throat. "Oh, God," she whispered. "We are almost there. I am almost to Lucy." I could hear the emotion in her voice. 3 months she had been separated from her daughter. 3 months of working and saving and missing the small arms and bright laughter of her child. And now, finally, they would be reunited. "Where does your sister live?" I asked. "On the north side of town," Caroline said. "A yellow house with a white fence." She described it in her letters. I have the address written down. "We will find it," I promised. We descended the hill and rode into Silver Falls as the sun began its descent toward evening. The town was bustling with activity. Wagons rolled down the main street. People walked on wooden sidewalks, going about their business. Children played in yards. Dogs barked. It was the sound of normal life. The kind of life Caroline deserved. The kind of life I had stopped living 3 years ago. We asked directions from a man outside the general store. He pointed us north, gave us landmarks to watch for. We followed his instructions through residential streets until we found it. A cheerful yellow house with a white picket fence and flowers blooming in window boxes, lace curtains in the windows, a swing hanging from a tree in the front yard. "This is it," Caroline whispered. She was trembling. I helped her down from the horse. She stood for a moment staring at the house, gathering her courage. Then she walked up the path to the front door. I stayed by the horse, giving her space for this reunion. Caroline knocked. I heard footsteps inside. The door opened. A woman stood in the doorway. She was older than Caroline, maybe 35, with the same color hair but a rounder face. She looked at Caroline for one stunned moment. Then she gasped, "Caroline? Oh my God, Caroline!" The 2 women embraced. I heard crying, happy crying this time. Relief and joy mingled together. Then I heard another voice, a small, high voice that made my heart clench. "Mama? Mama?" A little girl appeared in the doorway. She had Caroline's eyes and a tangle of brown curls. She wore a simple blue dress. She looked at Caroline with an expression of wonder and disbelief. "Lucy," Caroline breathed. "Oh, my Lucy." She dropped to her knees and opened her arms. The little girl hesitated for just a moment, as if she could not quite believe what she was seeing. Then she ran. She ran into her mother's arms, and Caroline caught her and held her tight, rocking back and forth, crying and laughing at the same time. I had to look away. The moment was too private, too sacred. I busied myself with the horse, giving them time. After several minutes, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see Caroline walking toward me, Lucy held on her hip. The little girl had her arms wrapped around her mother's neck and her face buried in Caroline's shoulder. "Tom," Caroline said. Her face was radiant despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is Lucy. Lucy, sweetheart, this is Mr. Brennan. He helped Mama get here safely." Lucy lifted her head and looked at me with solemn blue eyes. She studied me carefully, the way children do, assessing, deciding if I was trustworthy. "Hello, Lucy," I said gently. "It is very nice to meet you." "Are you a cowboy?" Lucy asked. Her voice was shy but curious. "I am," I said. "I have a ranch with horses and cattle." Her eyes widened slightly. "Real horses?" "Very real horses," I confirmed. "Maybe someday you can come visit and meet them." Lucy looked at her mother. "Can I, Mama?" "We will see," Caroline said softly. She looked at me over Lucy's head. Her expression was complex, grateful, overwhelmed, happy, uncertain. Caroline's sister, Ellen, had come out of the house. She was a practical-looking woman with kind eyes and capable hands. She looked at me, then at Caroline, then at the horse and our dusty, travel-worn appearance. "You must be exhausted," Ellen said. "Come inside, both of you. I will make tea and you can tell me everything." We spent the evening at Ellen's house. Lucy would not let go of Caroline. She sat in her mother's lap, playing with Caroline's hair, touching her face as if to confirm she was real. It was heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. Ellen made a simple supper, stew and fresh bread. We ate at the kitchen table while Carolyn told her sister a carefully edited version of what had happened in Copper Ridge. She left out the worst details, the most frightening parts. Ellen listened with growing anger in her eyes. "That monster," Ellen said when Caroline finished. "Someone should do something about Wade Garrison." "Someone will," I said quietly. Both women looked at me. "I am going back to Copper Ridge in a few days. I am going to make sure Wade Garrison answers for what he has done." "Tom, no," Caroline said. "It is too dangerous. It is necessary," I replied. "He destroyed my life 3 years ago. He tried to destroy yours now. How many more women will he hurt if someone does not stop him?" Ellen looked between us. Then she looked at Lucy, who had fallen asleep in Caroline's arms, exhausted from emotion. "Caroline," Ellen said carefully, "what are you going to do now? You cannot go back to Copper Ridge." "Not with Lucy, not while that man is still there." "I know," Caroline said softly. "Tom has offered us a place at his ranch, just temporarily, until I can find work somewhere else." Ellen raised her eyebrows. She looked at me with new interest. "That is very generous, Mr. Brennan." "Tom," I said. "Please call me Tom. And it is not generosity. It is the right thing to do." "Still," Ellen said, "people will talk. A single woman and her daughter living with an unmarried man." "Let them talk," I said. "I stopped caring about gossip a long time ago." Ellen studied me for another moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You seem like a good man, Tom. And God knows my sister deserves some goodness in her life. But I want you to promise me something." "What is that?" "Promise me you will keep them safe. Both of them. Promise me that if Wade Garrison comes after Caroline again, you will protect her." "I will protect them with my life," I said. And I meant it. We stayed that night at Ellen's house. She made up a room for Caroline and Lucy. I slept in the barn with the horse. It was comfortable enough. I had slept in worse places, but sleep did not come easily. I lay awake in the hay, listening to the sounds of the town settling down for the night. Dogs barking in the distance, a baby crying, the creak of wagon wheels, normal sounds of normal life. I thought about what I had promised Ellen, to protect Caroline and Lucy with my life. It was a big promise, a serious promise, but I knew I meant it. These two people, this woman and her child, had become important to me in a way I had not expected. "Ruth," I whispered into the darkness, "I hope you understand. I hope you know I am not trying to replace you. I could never replace you, but I think maybe you sent them to me, Caroline and Lucy. I think maybe this is what you meant when you used to say that every ending is also a beginning." The wind stirred the hay. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me. I woke to sunlight streaming through the barn door and the sound of a child's laughter. I sat up to see Lucy peeking around the doorframe, watching me with curious eyes. "Good morning," I said. She giggled and ducked back behind the door. Then her face appeared again. "Are you awake?" she asked. "I am now," I said, smiling. "Are you here to wake me up?" "Mama sent me," Lucy said. "She says breakfast is ready. She says to tell you there are eggs and bacon." "That sounds wonderful," I said. "Thank you for the message." Lucy hesitated, then took a few steps into the barn. She looked around with wide eyes at the horse in his stall, at the hay and tools and saddles hanging on the wall. "Is this where cowboys sleep?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said, "when we are traveling or working far from home." "Do you like being a cowboy?" "I do," I said. "I like working with animals. I like being outside. I like the freedom of it." Lucy nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. Then she looked at me with those solemn blue eyes. "Are you going to take care of my mama?" she asked. The question caught me by surprise. This little girl, barely 5 years old, asking the most important question of all with such directness. "Yes," I said. "I am going to do my very best to take care of both of you." "Good," Lucy said. "Because Mama cries sometimes at night. She thinks I do not hear her, but I do. She needs someone to take care of her too." My throat tightened. The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze me. "You are very smart, Lucy," I said gently, and very brave. Your mama is lucky to have you." Lucy smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen from her. It transformed her whole face, made her look mischievous and bright. "Come on," she said, taking my hand. "Breakfast is getting cold." We walked hand in hand across the yard to the house. Her small fingers wrapped around mine felt like trust, like responsibility, like hope. Over breakfast, Ellen laid out practical concerns. Carolyn needed clothes for Lucy. The child had grown in 3 months. Ellen had done her best, but a mother knows what her daughter needs. They would need supplies for the journey back to Copper Ridge, food and blankets and necessities for a 5-year-old. "I will take care of it," I said. "We will spend today getting everything you need. Tomorrow we can start back." "Tom," Caroline said hesitantly, "I do not have money for all of this. I used most of what I had saved just getting to Copper Ridge in the first place." "Consider it a loan," I said. "You can pay me back when you are working again. Or do not pay me back. It does not matter. What matters is that Lucy has what she needs." Carolyn looked like she wanted to argue, but Ellen cut in. "Accept his help, Caroline. Pride is all well and good, but your daughter needs clothes. Let the man help you." We spent the morning in the shops of Silver Falls. Lucy held Caroline's hand, pointing at everything, chattering excitedly about all the things she saw. We bought her 2 new dresses, sturdy shoes, a warm coat for the coming winter. We bought supplies for travel. Carolyn tried to be frugal, but I insisted on getting everything properly. If Lucy was going to be living at my ranch even temporarily, she should be comfortable. As we walked back to Ellen's house, arms full of packages, I saw them. 3 riders at the far end of the street. Even from a distance, I recognized the lead rider, Frank Dobbs. They had followed us to Silver Falls. "Caroline," I said quietly, "take Lucy and go into that shop, the one with the blue awning. Do not come out until I come get you." "What is wrong?" Caroline asked, but she followed my gaze and saw the riders. Her face went pale. "Oh, God." "Go," I said firmly. "Now." She gathered Lucy quickly and hurried into the shop. I set down the packages I was carrying and walked into the middle of the street. My hand rested on the pistol at my hip. I had not worn it yesterday when we arrived, but I was wearing it today. Some instinct had told me to be prepared. Frank Dobbs and his 2 companions rode up slowly. They stopped about 20 feet away. Frank smiled that unfriendly smile again. "Tom," he said, "you are a hard man to track. We have been looking for you since yesterday evening." "What do you want, Frank?" I asked. "Mr. Garrison wants to talk to you," Frank said. "Just a conversation. No trouble." "Tell Mr. Garrison I have nothing to say to him," I replied. "Not now, not ever." "See, that is a problem," Frank said. "Because, Mr. Garrison, he does not like being ignored. He does not like being told no, and he especially does not like his property being taken." "Carolyn, Reed is not property," I said, my voice cold. "She is a human being with rights and dignity." "That is not how Mr. Garrison sees it," Frank said. "He gave her a job. He gave her a place in Copper Ridge. She owes him." "She owes him nothing," I said. "He tried to force himself on her. He lied about her when she fought back. He destroyed her reputation. She owes him less than nothing." Frank sighed. He looked at his companions, then back at me. "Tom, you are making this harder than it needs to be. Just tell us where she is. Let us talk to her. Then everyone can go home happy." "No," I said flatly. Frank's smile disappeared. His hand moved toward his gun. His companions did the same. The street around us had gone quiet. People were backing away, sensing trouble. Shop doors closed. Women pulled their children inside. In moments we were alone in the middle of the street, 3 armed men facing one. The mathematics were not in my favor, but I had something they did not. I had a reason to fight that went deeper than loyalty to Wade Garrison. I was fighting for Caroline and Lucy. I was fighting for Ruth's memory. I was fighting for every woman Wade Garrison had ever hurt. And that made me dangerous. "You really want to do this, Frank?" I asked quietly. "You really want to draw on me in the middle of town? In front of all these witnesses?" Frank hesitated. I could see him calculating. A gunfight in Copper Ridge on Garrison land, that was one thing. But Silver Falls was neutral territory. The law here did not answer to Wade Garrison. "We will be seeing you again, Tom," Frank said finally. "Real soon. And next time, you might not be so lucky." They turned their horses and rode away. I stood in the street, watching them go, my heart pounding. My hand was shaking where it rested on my pistol. I had been prepared to draw, prepared to fight, prepared to kill or be killed. When they were out of sight, I went to the shop where Caroline and Lucy were hiding. Caroline was standing by the window, Lucy held tight in her arms. Her face was white. "Are they gone?" she whispered. "For now," I said. "But they will be back. We need to leave Silver Falls. Tonight." Caroline nodded. She looked down at Lucy, who was crying quietly, frightened by the tension she could feel, but not understand. "It is all right, sweetheart," Caroline murmured. "Everything is going to be all right." But I could see in her eyes that she was not sure she believed it. We left Silver Falls after dark. Ellen had helped us pack quickly and quietly. She hugged her sister tight at the door. "Be careful," Ellen whispered. "Write to me when you can." "I will," Caroline promised. Ellen looked at me. "You keep them safe, Tom Brennan." "I will," I said. We rode north instead of west. I did not want to take the direct route back to Copper Ridge. Too easy to ambush. Instead, we would loop around, take the longer route through the mountains. It would add 2 days to our journey, but it would be safer. Lucy rode with her mother. The little girl was quiet, subdued by the hasty departure and the fear she sensed in the adults around her. Caroline held her close, whispering reassurances. We rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horse. By dawn we were miles from Silver Falls, climbing into the foothills. The air was cooler here. Pine trees replaced sage and juniper. The landscape was greener, more lush. We made camp in a grove of aspen trees near a stream. The leaves shimmered gold and silver in the morning light. It was beautiful, peaceful. For a moment I could almost forget we were running. While Caroline got Lucy settled, I scouted the area. No sign of pursuit, no hoofbeats, no dust on the horizon. Maybe Frank and his men had given up. Maybe they had gone back to Copper Ridge to report failure to Wade Garrison. Or maybe they were just biding their time. When I returned to camp, Lucy was playing by the stream, splashing in the shallow water and laughing. Caroline was watching her with an expression of such love and such fear that it broke my heart. "She is resilient," I said softly, coming to stand beside Caroline. "She is," Caroline agreed. "But she should not have to be. She is 5 years old. She should be playing with other children, going to school, learning her letters. Not running through the wilderness because her mother made an enemy of a powerful man." "You did nothing wrong," I said firmly. "Wade Garrison is the one at fault, not you." "I know that in my head," Caroline said, "but my heart still feels guilty. I should have been more careful, should have seen the danger, should have protected her better." "You protected her by getting her away from him," I said. "You protected her by being brave enough to say no. You protected her by leaving when staying would have been easier." Caroline looked at me. We were standing close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her blue-gray eyes, close enough that I could smell the lavender scent of her hair. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for believing me, for coming with me, for keeping us safe. I do not know what I would have done without you." "You would have survived," I said. "You would have found a way. You are stronger than you think." "Maybe," Caroline said, "but I am glad I did not have to find out." We stood there in the dappled sunlight, watching Lucy play. This moment felt suspended somehow, outside of time, as if the rest of the world had fallen away and there was only this. The three of us. The sound of water, the rustling of leaves. Lucy looked up and saw us watching her. "Mama," she called. "Mr. Tom, come play with me." Caroline smiled. "Shall we?" "We shall," I said. We spent the morning playing by the stream. I showed Lucy how to skip stones across the water. Caroline picked wild flowers with her daughter. We built a small dam with rocks and sticks. For a few hours, we were not running from anything. We were just three people enjoying a beautiful day. But as the sun climbed higher, reality reasserted itself. We had to keep moving. We had to reach Copper Ridge. We had to face whatever was waiting for us there. We traveled for 2 more days through the mountains. The going was slower with Lucy, but she was a brave little traveler. She did not complain when she was tired. She did not cry when she was hungry or cold. She just held her mother's hand and kept going. On the second night, as we sat around the campfire, Lucy fell asleep in Caroline's lap. Caroline stroked her daughter's hair gently, her eyes distant. "What are you thinking about?" I asked softly. "The future," Caroline said. "What happens when we reach your ranch? What happens after that? I keep trying to plan, but there are too many unknowns." "Then do not plan," I suggested. "Just take it one day at a time." "Is that what you did? After Ruth died?" "No," I admitted. "I did not plan, and I did not take it one day at a time. I just stopped. I stopped living. I stopped caring. I existed, but I was not alive." "What changed?" Caroline asked. "What made you start living again?" "You did," I said simply. "You and Lucy, helping you, protecting you. It gave me a purpose again. It made me remember why life is worth fighting for." Caroline looked at me for a long moment. The firelight played across her face. Lucy slept peacefully in her arms. "Tom," Caroline had said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think it is possible to care for someone new without betraying the memory of someone you loved?" The question hit me hard, because I had been asking myself the same thing for days now. Ever since that first night when Caroline cried and I sat beside her. Ever since I held Lucy's small hand. Ever since I realized that I was feeling things I thought had died with Ruth. "Yes," I said quietly, "I think it is. I think Ruth would want me to be happy. I think she would want me to live. And I think she would understand that loving someone new does not mean forgetting her." I paused. "Do you think about him?" I asked. "Lucy's father?" "Sometimes," Caroline admitted. "But not with love, only with anger for what he stole from us, for the life he promised and then abandoned." "You deserve better," I said. "So do you," Caroline replied. Our eyes met across the fire. She didn't look away, and neither did I. An acknowledgement hung between us, unspoken but understood. Neither of us was as alone as we had been that morning, but before either of us could say more, Lucy stirred in Caroline's arms and murmured sleepily. "Mama, I am here, sweetheart," Caroline whispered. "Go back to sleep. Is Mr. Tom still here?" "He is right here," Caroline said. Lucy settled back down, safe, secure, trusting that the adults would protect her, and I made a silent vow that I would. No matter what was waiting for us in Copper Ridge, no matter what Wade Garrison had planned, I would protect them both. Because they were mine now, not in the sense of ownership or possession, but in the sense of choice. I had chosen them, and they had chosen me, and that was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. We reached the outskirts of Copper Ridge on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after Caroline had walked out of town alone. The journey back had taken longer than expected. We had traveled slowly with Lucy, taking the mountain route to avoid Frank Dobbs and his men. We had camped in hidden valleys and moved mostly at dawn and dusk when the light made us harder to spot from a distance. But now we were here, and everything was about to change. I could see the town spread out below us from the hilltop where we had stopped to rest. Copper Ridge looked exactly as I had left it, the same wooden buildings lining Main Street, the same church steeple rising above the rooftops, the same dust hanging in the air. But I was different now. I was not the silent ghost who had ridden out 3 weeks ago. I was a man with a purpose, a man with people depending on him. Lucy was asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted from the morning's ride. Caroline was watching the town with an expression I could not quite read. Fear, yes, but also determination. She had come back not because she wanted to, but because running would mean always looking over her shoulder, always wondering when Wade Garrison would catch up with them. "We are not going to your ranch, are we?" Caroline said quietly. "No," I said. We are going straight to the sheriff. We are going to demand that he listen to the truth. And if he will not, we are going to ride to Helena and bring back a federal marshal." "What if the sheriff arrests me?" Caroline asked. "What if Wade has spread more lies?" "Then I will break you out," I said, "and we will ride to Helena anyway." Despite everything, Caroline smiled slightly. "You are very determined, Tom Brennan." "I have wasted 3 years," I said. "I am not wasting another day. Wade Garrison has gotten away with hurting people for too long. It ends now." We rode down the hill toward Copper Ridge. As we entered the main street, people stopped what they were doing to stare. I saw shock on their faces, confusion. Caroline Reed had left in disgrace, and now here she was, riding back with Tom the Silent and a small child. The gossip mill would be churning within minutes. "Let them stare," I said quietly to Caroline. "Let them wonder. The truth will come out soon enough." We tied up outside the sheriff's office. Caroline woke Lucy gently. The little girl rubbed her eyes and looked around at the unfamiliar town. "Stay close to Mama," Caroline told her, "and be very quiet, sweetheart." Lucy nodded seriously and took her mother's hand. The sheriff's office was a small building next to the jail. I had not been inside in 3 years. Not since the day after the fire when I had tried to tell Sheriff Morrison that the cabin burning was not an accident. He had listened with skeptical eyes and told me that grief sometimes makes men see conspiracies where there are only tragedies. I pushed open the door. Sheriff Morrison looked up from his desk. He was a man in his mid-50s, gray-haired and weathered, with eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. When he saw me, surprise flickered across his face. When he saw Caroline behind me, that surprise turned to alarm. "Tom," he said carefully, "Miss Reed, I did not expect to see either of you back in Copper Ridge. I need to report a crime," I said. "Multiple crimes, actually. Assault, false testimony, conspiracy, and murder." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Those are serious accusations, Tom. You better have serious evidence." "I do," I said. "And so does Miss Reed. We both need you to listen, really listen, not dismiss us because Wade Garrison is the mayor's brother." Morrison's expression hardened. "Tom, I understand you are still grieving Ruth, but you cannot go around making wild accusations against respected citizens." "Respected," I said, and I could hear the anger in my own voice. "Wade Garrison cornered my wife and assaulted her. When she threatened to report him, my cabin mysteriously burned down with her inside." "That is not wild accusation, Sheriff. That is fact." "You have no proof," Morrison said. "I have a witness," I replied. "Someone who was there. Someone who set that fire on Wade Garrison's orders." Morrison went very still. "What witness?" "His name is Pete," I said. "Old Pete, who works for the Garrison Ranch. He told me himself 3 days ago when Frank Dobbs tried to stop us from reaching Silver Falls. He said Wade ordered him to teach Ruth a lesson. He thought the cabin was empty. He did not know she was inside. But he set that fire, Sheriff, and he is ready to confess." This was not entirely true. Old Pete had confessed in the heat of the moment, but I had no idea if he would actually testify. But I needed to shake Morrison, needed to make him take this seriously. "Where is this Pete now?" Morrison asked. "I do not know," I admitted, "but I can find him, and when I do, you will hear his confession." Morrison shook his head. "Tom, even if this Pete exists, even if he confesses, that does not prove Wade Garrison ordered anything. It would be the word of a ranch hand against a respected businessman." "Then add Miss Reed's testimony to it," I said. "Wade Garrison assaulted her too. Same pattern, same threats. How many women does he have to hurt before you take this seriously?" Morrison looked at Caroline. She stood tall, holding Lucy's hand, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Miss Reed," Morrison said, "I told you before, if you had evidence, real evidence, I would investigate. But you had nothing except your word against Wade Garrison's." "I have my word," Caroline said firmly, "and I have the marks he left on my wrist. And I have the fact that he destroyed my reputation and drove me out of town when I dared to say no to him." How much more evidence do you need, Sheriff? Before Morrison could answer, the door behind us opened. I turned to see Wade Garrison himself walk in. He was dressed impeccably, as always, fine suit, polished boots, gold watch chain glinting at his vest. He looked at me, then at Caroline, then at Lucy. His eyes lingered on the child for a moment too long. His expression was calculating, predatory. "Well, he said smoothly. "Tom Brennan and Miss Reed. What an unexpected reunion. I heard you had left us, Miss Reed. Gone to Silver Falls, I believe?" "I came back," Caroline said. Her voice was steady, but I could feel her tension. "So I see," Wade said. He looked at Morrison. "Sheriff, I hope these two are not bothering you with more of their fantasies. They are making some serious accusations, Mr. Garrison," Morrison said carefully. "Maybe you should hear them out." Wade smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "I have heard Miss Reed's accusations before. Unfounded. Hysterical. The product of a woman scorned after I politely declined her advances." "That is a lie," Caroline said, her voice shaking now with fury. "You cornered me in the schoolhouse. You tried to force yourself on me, and when I fought back, you destroyed my life." "Your word against mine," Wade said with a shrug, "and we both know whose word this town will believe." "What about Ruth Brennan?" I said, stepping forward. "What about my wife? You assaulted her too. You threatened her. And then she died in a fire that was no accident." Wade's expression remained smooth, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Grief has made you paranoid, Tom. Your wife's death was a tragedy. But it was an accident," the sheriff investigated. "He found no evidence of foul play." "Because you are careful," I said. "Because you have power and money, and everyone is too afraid to stand up to you." "But I am not afraid anymore, Wade. I am not staying silent, and I am going to make sure everyone knows what you really are." Wade studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled again, that cold, empty smile. "Be careful, Tom," he said softly. "Be very careful. Men who make threats against me tend to have unfortunate accidents." "Is that a threat, Mr. Garrison?" Morrison asked sharply. "Of course not, Sheriff," Wade said. "I am simply concerned for Tom's well-being. He has not been himself since Ruth died. I would hate to see him come to harm." The door opened again. This time it was my mother who entered. Abigail Brennan was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself with a presence that made her seem much larger. She took in the scene quickly. Her eyes moved from me to Caroline, to Lucy, to Wade Garrison. "Thomas," she said, "what is going on here?" "Mother," I said, "this does not concern you." "It concerns me when my son is making enemies of powerful men," Abigail said. She looked at Wade Garrison with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Pure contempt. Though in this case I find myself in complete agreement with him. "Mrs. Brennan," Wade said carefully, "I hope you will talk some sense into your son. My son has more sense in his little finger than you have in your entire body, Mr. Garrison," Abigail said coldly. "I know what you did to Ruth. Half the women in this town know what you have done to them, or tried to do. We have stayed silent out of fear. But if Tom is brave enough to speak, then so am I." The room went silent. Wade's smile had vanished completely. Morrison was staring at my mother with shock. "Mrs. Brennan," Morrison said, "are you saying Wade Garrison has assaulted other women in this town?" "I am saying that Wade Garrison is a predator," Abigail said clearly. "I am saying that he uses his power and his family name to prey on women who have no protection. I am saying that Ruth Brennan was one of his victims. And I am saying that if you do not investigate him properly, Sheriff, then I will write to the territorial governor myself." Wade's face had gone red. "You have no proof of these slanders," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Then let us find out," came a new voice from the doorway. We all turned. An older man stood there, well-dressed, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore a badge on his vest, a federal marshal's badge. "My name is James Hargrove," the man said, "United States Marshal, Montana Territory. I am here investigating reports of corruption and organized criminal activity in Copper Ridge, And from what I just heard, it seems I arrived at an opportune moment." Wade Garrison's face went white. Marshal Hargrove walked into the room. He nodded to Morrison, who stood up quickly, suddenly looking nervous. He looked at Wade Garrison with the expression of a man who had just found something unpleasant on the bottom of his shoe. "Mr. Garrison," Hargrove said, "I have been following your activities for some time now. Land fraud, intimidation of witnesses, possible involvement in several suspicious deaths. But assault and murder, those are new additions to your file." "I have done nothing wrong," Wade said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Then you will not mind answering some questions," Hargrove said, "under oath, and you will not mind if I interview the women of this town, all of them, to see if Mrs. Brennan's claims hold water." "You cannot do this," Wade said. "My brother is the mayor. I have rights." "Your brother, the mayor, is also under investigation," Hargrove said calmly, "for accepting bribes and using his position to cover up your crimes. So I suggest you cooperate, Mr. Garrison, because things are about to become very uncomfortable for you." Wade looked around the room, at the marshal, at Morrison, at my mother, at me, at Caroline. I saw the moment he realized he had lost, the moment his carefully constructed world began to crumble. "I want a lawyer," he said finally. "You will have one," Hargrove said. "Sheriff Morrison, please place Mr. Garrison under arrest pending investigation." "On what charge?" Wade demanded. "Assault, for starters," Hargrove said. "We will see what else we add as the investigation proceeds." Morrison looked like he wanted to protest, but one glance at Hargrove's face told him that would be unwise. He stood up and walked around his desk. "Wade Garrison," he said heavily, "you are under arrest." As Morrison led Wade out in handcuffs, Wade turned and looked at me. The hatred in his eyes was pure and absolute. "This is not over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It is finally over." When they were gone, Hargrove turned to us. "Mrs. Brennan, Tom, Miss Reed, I need statements from all of you. Detailed statements. Everything you know about Wade Garrison and his activities." "We will tell you everything," my mother said. She looked at me with pride in her eyes. "Everything." Over the next 3 days, Copper Ridge was turned upside down. Marshal Hargrove interviewed everyone. He brought in 2 deputies from Helena to help with the investigation. One by one, women came forward. Women who had been assaulted by Wade Garrison, women who had been threatened, women who had stayed silent out of fear. The stories were heartbreaking. A widow who Wade had tried to cheat out of her land, a young woman who he had cornered in an alley, a mother whose daughter he had propositioned. Each story added weight to the case against him. Old Pete was found and brought in for questioning. At first he refused to talk, but when Hargrove explained that he could either testify against Wade and face reduced charges or stay silent and hang for murder, Pete chose to talk. He confessed to setting the fire that killed Ruth. He said Wade had paid him and promised him protection. He said he thought the cabin was empty. He said he had lived with the guilt for 3 years. It was hard to hear, hard to have my suspicions confirmed so brutally, but it was also vindicating. I had been right. Ruth's death had not been an accident. Caroline stayed at my mother's house during the investigation. Lucy played in the garden while her mother gave her statement to the marshal. My mother took to both of them immediately, fussing over Lucy like a grandmother and treating Caroline like a daughter. One evening, I found my mother and Caroline sitting on the porch watching Lucy chase butterflies in the yard. They were talking quietly, and when I approached, they both looked up and smiled. "Join us, Tom," my mother said. Caroline was just telling me about Boston. I sat down on the porch steps. Lucy ran over and climbed onto my lap without hesitation. She had become comfortable with me over our journey. She called me Mr. Tom and asked me endless questions about horses and cattle and what cowboys did. "Tell me about the ranch," she demanded. "Tell me about the horses again." So I told her. I described the valley where my cabin sat, the creek that ran clear and cold even in summer, the mountains rising in the distance, the horses in the corral, each with their own personality, the cattle grazing on the hillsides. I painted a picture of the life we could have there, the three of us, a family. "It sounds beautiful," Caroline said softly when I finished. She was looking at me with an expression that made my heart race. "It is," I said, "and it will be even more beautiful with you there." My mother smiled and stood up. "Lucy," she said, "would you like to help me make cookies?" "Yes!" Lucy scrambled off my lap and ran inside with my mother, leaving Caroline and me alone on the porch. "Your mother is wonderful," Caroline said. "She has made me feel more welcome in 3 days than most people in Copper Ridge did in 6 months. "She likes you," I said, "and she loves Lucy. I think she is already planning your wedding." Carolyn laughed, but then she sobered. "Tom, about that, about us. We need to talk about what happens next." "I know," I said. "When this trial is over, when Wade Garrison is convicted, you will be free to go anywhere you want, to stay in Copper Ridge or go back to Silver Falls or even return to Boston. Whatever you choose, I will support you." "And what do you want?" Caroline asked quietly. "I want you to stay," I said. The truth came out simply, honestly. I want you and Lucy at my ranch, not as guests, not temporarily. I want you to build a life there. I want Lucy to grow up running through those valleys and learning to ride horses. I want to come home in the evenings and find you both there. I want to be a family." I paused. "But I know it is fast," I continued. "I know we have only known each other for a few weeks. I know I am asking for a lot. So I will understand if you need time, if you need to think about it, if you need to be sure." Caroline reached out and took my hand. "Tom," she said, "I have spent most of my adult life being careful, being cautious, making sensible decisions. And where did it get me? Alone, struggling, running from a monster." She squeezed my hand. "But then you came riding out of nowhere," she said. "You believed me when no one else did. You protected me and my daughter. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed me what a good man looks like. So no, I do not need more time. I do not need to think about it. I already know my answer." She smiled. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Tom, I will stay. We will build a life at your ranch. We will be a family." The relief and joy that flooded through me was so intense I could barely breathe. I pulled Caroline to her feet and wrapped my arms around her. She held me just as tightly. "I promise," I whispered into her hair. "I promise I will take care of you, both of you. I promise you will never walk alone again." "I know," Caroline whispered back. "I trust you, Tom. Completely." We stood there on the porch, holding each other as the sun set behind the mountains. Inside, I could hear my mother and Lucy laughing, the sound of family, the sound of home. The trial took place 2 weeks later. A judge came from Helena to preside. The courtroom was packed. It seemed like everyone in Copper Ridge and half of Silver Falls had come to watch. Wade Garrison sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His expensive suit could not hide the fact that he was a broken man. His brother, Mayor Garrison, sat in the gallery, looking gray and defeated. His political career was over. His family name destroyed. The prosecution called witness after witness. Women who testified about Wade's assaults. Old Pete, who confessed to setting the fire that killed Ruth. Business associates who testified about Wade's fraud and intimidation. The evidence was overwhelming. I testified about Ruth, about what she had told me, about the fire, about 3 years of grief and silence and suspicion finally proven true. Caroline testified about what Wade had done to her in the schoolhouse, about the lies he had spread, about being driven from town. My mother testified. So did Ellen, who had traveled from Silver Falls. So did a dozen other women who Wade had hurt or threatened over the years. The defense tried to argue that it was all a conspiracy, that jealous rivals and scorned women were working together to destroy an innocent man. But no one believed it. The truth was too clear, too consistent, too damning. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Wade Garrison was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. Old Pete received 10 years for manslaughter. Mayor Garrison resigned and left Copper Ridge in disgrace. When the verdict was read, I felt something release in my chest. Something I had been carrying for 3 years. The weight of grief and guilt and helpless rage, it did not disappear completely. I would always miss Ruth. I would always carry the scar of her loss. But the burden of unanswered justice, that was finally lifted. Caroline was sitting beside me in the courtroom. She took my hand and squeezed it. Lucy sat on her other side, too young to fully understand what was happening, but sensing the importance of the moment. "It is over," Caroline whispered. "Yes," I said. "It is finally over." 3 months passed. Fall gave way to winter. Snow covered the mountains and dusted the valley where my ranch sat. The cabin that had once been silent and cold was now filled with warmth and life and laughter. Caroline had transformed the place. She had made curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors. She had planted an herb garden that would bloom again in spring. She had turned the small spare room into a bedroom for Lucy, painting it yellow like sunshine. And she had turned the barn into a schoolroom. Word had spread quickly that there was a teacher at the Brennan Ranch. Families from miles around started bringing their children. By October, Carolyn had 15 students ranging in age from 5 to 14. She taught them reading and arithmetic and geography. She taught them with patience and kindness and the fierce intelligence that had first made me notice her. Lucy thrived. She had grown taller and stronger. Her cheeks had color in them. She rode the gentlest of my horses with fearless joy. She followed me around the ranch asking endless questions and helping with small chores. She called me Tom now instead of Mr. Tom. And sometimes, when she was very tired or very happy, she would slip and call me Papa. The first time it happened, we were mucking out stalls. She was helping carry water buckets. She tripped and spilled water everywhere and looked up at me with worried eyes. "I am sorry, Papa," she said. Then she realized what she had said. Her eyes went wide. I knelt down so we were eye level. "It is all right," I said gently. "You did not do anything wrong." "But I called you Papa," Lucy whispered. "Mama said I should not, unless you said it was all right." "I would be honored if you called me Papa," I said. "If that is what you want?" Lucy threw her arms around my neck. "I do want that," she said fiercely. "I want you to be my Papa." I held her tight, this little girl who had come into my life unexpected and changed everything. "Then you shall call me Papa," I said, "and I will do my very best to be worthy of it." That evening I found Caroline in the kitchen preparing supper. She looked up when I came in, and she must have seen something in my face because she set down her knife and wiped her hands on her apron. "What is it?" she asked. "Lucy called me Papa today," I said. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Tom, what did you say?" "I told her I would be honored," I said. "I hope that was all right." "I should have asked you first." Caroline crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around me. "Of course it is all right," she said. "You have been more of a father to her in these few months than her real father ever was. She loves you, Tom. We both do." I pulled her closer, unable to find words big enough. "Both of you," I finally managed. "You're both everything I never thought I'd have again." We stood there in the warm kitchen, holding each other, as Lucy's laughter drifted in from the other room where my mother was reading her a story. This was home. This was family. This was everything I thought I had lost forever. On a cold day in early December, I asked Caroline to marry me. We were standing on the hill overlooking the valley. The same hill where I had stood 3 months ago watching her walk out of Copper Ridge alone. The same hill where I had made the decision to ride after her. The valley was beautiful in winter. Snow covered everything like a white blanket. Smoke rose from the cabin chimney. I could see Lucy and my mother building a snowman in the yard below. "Caroline," I said, "I have something to ask you." She turned to look at me, her cheeks pink from the cold, her eyes bright. "I am not good with fancy words," I continued, "and I do not have a ring yet. I wanted to ask you first, make sure you were willing, before I spent money on something you might not want." "Tom," Caroline said softly, "what are you trying to say?" "I am trying to say that I love you," I said. "I am trying to say that you and Lucy have become my whole world. I am trying to say that I want to make this official." Legal. I want to marry you, Caroline Reed. I want to be your husband and Lucy's father. I want us to be a real family. I paused. Will you marry me? Caroline was crying now, happy tears that froze on her cheeks in the cold air. Yes, she said. Yes, Tom. Of course, yes. I have been yours since the moment you wrote after me. I think I have been waiting my whole life for you. I pulled her into my arms and kissed her. It was our first real kiss, tender and sweet and full of promise. When we finally broke apart, we were both laughing. We should tell Lucy, Caroline said. We should tell my mother, I countered. She will want to start planning immediately. We walked down the hill hand in hand. Lucy saw us coming and ran to meet us, throwing snow in the air and laughing. Tom, Mama, look at my snowman. It is wonderful, sweetheart, Caroline said. And we have something to tell you. Lucy looked between us with curious eyes. What? Tom and I are getting married, Caroline said. He is going to be your papa, officially. How do you feel about that? Lucy's face split into the biggest smile I had ever seen. Really? Really? Truly? Really, truly, I said. Lucy shrieked with joy and jumped into my arms. We are going to be a real family, she shouted. A real family with a mama and a papa and a grandma. My mother came out of the cabin, alerted by the noise. What is all this excitement? We are getting married, Caroline announced, her voice ringing with happiness. My mother clasped her hands together. Oh, thank the Lord, she said. I was beginning to think you two would never get around to it. We have much to do, a wedding to plan, a dress to make, invitations to send. She bustled over and hugged us both. Then she looked at me seriously. You are a good man, Thomas Brennan, she said. Your father would be proud. And Ruth, she paused. Ruth would be happy that you found love again. Thank you, Mother, I said quietly. The wedding took place in early spring. We held it at the small church in Copper Ridge, the same church where I had buried Ruth 3 years earlier. Some might have thought it was wrong to marry in the same place where I had mourned my first wife. But to me, it felt right. It felt like a circle completing, like honoring the past while stepping into the future. The church was full, friends and neighbors, Carolyn's students and their families. Ellen came from Silver Falls with her husband and children. Even Marshall Hargrove attended, having become a friend during the investigation and trial. Caroline wore a simple ivory dress that my mother had made. Her hair was arranged with small white flowers. She looked beautiful, radiant. Lucy stood beside her in a new blue dress, holding a basket of flower petals and beaming with pride. I wore my best suit. My hands were shaking as I stood at the altar waiting for Caroline to walk down the aisle, not from fear or doubt, but from the overwhelming sense that I was the luckiest man alive. The ceremony was simple. Traditional vows, promises to love and honor and cherish. When the preacher asked if I took Caroline to be my wife, my voice rang out clear and strong. I do. When he asked Caroline, she looked into my eyes and said, I do, with all my heart. We exchanged rings, simple gold bands. Then the preacher pronounced us husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, he said. I kissed Caroline as our friends and family cheered. Lucy laughed and threw flower petals. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. It was a moment of pure joy, pure rightness. At the reception afterward, as we ate cake and danced and celebrated, I found myself standing apart for a moment, just watching Caroline laugh with Ellen, watching Lucy play with other children, watching my mother hold court with the other older women, no doubt sharing stories about me. This was my life now. This was my family. After 3 years of silence and grief and barely existing, I was alive again. I was happy. Marshall Hargrove came to stand beside me. You look like a man at peace, Tom, he said. I am, I said finally. You did a brave thing, Hargrove said, standing up to Wade Garrison. Not many men would have had the courage. I did not do it alone, I replied. Caroline was the brave one. She fought back when it would have been easier to stay silent. All I did was stand beside her. That is enough, Hargrove said. Sometimes that is all it takes to change everything. One person willing to stand up, One person willing to say, "This is wrong." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Be happy, Tom. You have earned it." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the church windows, I gathered Caroline and Lucy. We stood together as a family for the first time, as husband and wife and daughter. "Ready to go home?" I asked. "Home," Caroline echoed, smiling. "Yes, let us go home." We rode back to the ranch in the wagon. Lucy fell asleep between us, exhausted from excitement. Caroline leaned against my shoulder. The evening was cool but not cold. Spring was coming. The world was waking up again. When we reached the ranch, I carried Lucy inside and tucked her into bed. Caroline and I stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep. "She is so peaceful," Caroline whispered. "So happy." "She is home," I said. "We all are." Caroline turned to me and took both my hands in hers. "Tom," she said, "I want you to know something. When I left Copper Ridge that day, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything. But then you came riding after me, and you gave me something I never expected to have again." "What is that?" I asked. "Hope," she said simply. "You gave me hope, and a home, and a family. You gave me everything. You gave me the same," I said. "You brought me back to life, Caroline. You and Lucy reminded me what it means to have a future worth living." "We found each other when we both needed finding," Caroline said. "That is what makes it real. That is what makes it strong." She was right. Our love was not about one person rescuing another. It was about two wounded souls finding each other, supporting each other, choosing each other every day. We walked out to the porch and sat together in the evening air. The stars were beginning to appear, the same stars that had watched over us on that first night when we camped by the creek, when we were still strangers learning to trust each other. "Tom," Caroline said after a while, "do you still talk to her, to Ruth?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Is that wrong?" "No," Caroline said firmly. "She was your wife. She will always be part of your story. I would never ask you to forget her." "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." "What do you tell her?" Caroline asked curiously. "I tell her about you and Lucy," I said. "I tell her that I am happy. I tell her that I think she would like you, that she would be glad I found someone who makes me want to live again." I paused. "And I tell her thank you," I continued, "because I think somehow, wherever she is, she sent you to me. I think she knew I needed to be saved from myself, and she sent the right person at the right time." "That is a beautiful thought," Caroline said softly. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply in the darkening sky. Somewhere inside, my mother was putting away the last of the wedding gifts. Lucy was dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds dream. The ranch was quiet except for the gentle sounds of night. Cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the trees, the creek running its eternal course. This was peace. This was home. This was everything worth fighting for. Caroline rested her head on my shoulder. "I love you, Tom Brennan," she said. "I love you too, Caroline Brennan," I replied, and felt the rightness of that new name, her new identity, not Caroline Reed, the disgraced teacher, but Caroline Brennan, my wife, Lucy's mother, part of this family we had built from broken pieces. The next morning, I woke early as always. Caroline was still asleep beside me, her hair spread across the pillow. I dressed quietly and went outside to start the morning chores. The air was crisp and clean. The sun was just beginning to light the eastern sky. As I walked toward the barn, I heard small footsteps behind me. I turned to see Lucy, still in her nightgown, running to catch up with me. "Papa," she called, "wait for me." I stopped and waited. She caught up and slipped her small hand into mine. "You are up early," I said. "Could not sleep?" "I wanted to help you with the horses," Lucy said. "Can I?" "Of course you can," I said. "But first, let us get you into proper clothes. Your mama will have my hide if I let you muck stalls in your nightgown." Lucy giggled. We walked back to the cabin together. Caroline was awake now, starting breakfast. She smiled when she saw us. "Teaching her to be a rancher already?" Caroline asked. "She volunteered," I said. I could not say no. "You never can say no to her," Caroline said fondly. You are going to spoil her terribly." "That is my job as her papa," I replied. "Spoiling her is in the job description." Lucy got dressed, and we went out to the barn together. I showed her how to measure out grain for the horses, how to check their hooves for stones, how to brush their coats until they gleamed. She listened intently, asking questions, absorbing everything like the bright child she was. As we worked, I thought about the future, about Lucy growing up on this ranch, about maybe having more children someday, if Caroline wanted, about growing old with the woman I loved, about building something that would last. The past 3 years had been about survival, about existing in silence and grief. But now, finally, I was living, really living, and it was better than I ever could have imagined. That evening, after Lucy was in bed and my mother had returned to town, Caroline and I stood together at the bedroom window, looking out over the moonlit valley. It had become our ritual, this quiet moment at day's end. "What are you thinking about?" Caroline asked. "The future," I said. "Everything we are going to build here, everything we are going to become." "Tell me," Caroline said. "Paint me a picture of our future." So I did. I told her about expanding the ranch, about building a proper schoolhouse for her students, about teaching Lucy and any future children to ride and rope and appreciate this land, about growing old together, watching grandchildren play in the same valleys where we had fallen in love. "That sounds perfect," Caroline said when I finished. "That sounds like everything I ever wanted but never dared to dream about." "Then let us make it real," I said. "Together." "Together," Caroline agreed. We sat under the stars, holding hands, planning our future. Two people who had been broken by life and by cruel men. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to step into the light together. My name is Thomas Brennan. People used to call me Tom the Silent, but I am not silent anymore. I have found my voice. I have found my purpose. I have found my family. 3 months ago, I saw a woman walking out of Copper Ridge alone. I rode after her, and everything changed. She changed me. She saved me. And together, we built something beautiful from the ashes of our old lives. This is our story. This is our beginning. And it is only the beginning. Because when the dust settles, when the storms pass, when the battles are won, what remains is simple and true. Love, family, home, the things worth fighting for. The things worth living for. Caroline squeezed my hand. The stars shone overhead. Inside the cabin, Lucy slept peacefully, safe and loved. And I knew with absolute certainty that none of us would face the world alone again. We had each other. We had this life we had chosen. We had hope and a future as wide as the Montana sky. The dust had settled, and we were home.